History remembers the Civil War for its legendary battles and larger-than-life leaders. Gettysburg, Antietam, Grant. These are the names we all know. We see the statues, we've read the textbooks, and we think we have the whole story. But what if the most important moments of the war weren't fought on a battlefield? While the nation was tearing itself apart in public, a hidden world of conspiracy and crime was operating just beneath the surface. We're talking about assassination plots, secret societies pulling the strings, and fortunes that simply vanished. This isn't the history you learned in school. Tonight, we're exposing the dark secrets the Civil War tried to hide. Before the first shots were even fired at Fort Sumter, a kind of shadow government was already taking shape. This wasn't a government with elected officials, but one of secret oaths and clandestine meetings. They called themselves the Knights of the Golden Circle, and their ultimate goal was staggering. Founded in 1854 by an adventurer named George Bickley, the KGC had a wild vision to forge a massive new slave empire. And this wasn't just about protecting slavery in the South. It was about aggressive expansion. Their proposed empire, the Golden Circle, had a grandiose proposed capital in Havana, Cuba, Spa, and would have stretched 2,400 miles in diameter. It was designed to swallow the southern United States, all of Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. The goal was to create an unstoppable global monopoly on tobacco, sugar, and cottonseed produced by enslaved people. While it might sound like a fantasy, the idea was popular enough among Southern sympathizers that local chapters, called castles, popped up across the South and even in border states. When the Civil War finally exploded, the KGC's focus shifted from conquering new territory to sabotage. They became a fifth column for the Confederacy, a network of spies and agitators working deep inside Union territory. Their influence was especially strong in the Midwestern states like Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. There, among populations with divided loyalties, the KGC found fertile ground for their anti-Union agenda, operating among anti-war Democrats known as Copperheads. Their mission was to cripple the Union war effort from the inside out. Their methods were insidious. They encouraged Union soldiers to desert. They organized armed resistance to the federal draft, sometimes leading to violent clashes. Their biggest plan was a plot known as the Northwest Conspiracy, which aimed to trigger a huge uprising, seize the governments of several Midwestern states, and form a new Northwestern Confederacy that would then side with the South. Federal authorities were terrified. U.S. Judge Advocate General Joseph Holt warned of a massive treasonous plot, blaming it on the Knights and their successor groups. Hundreds were arrested, and the trials revealed the shocking scope of the conspiracy. Still, historians today debate just how powerful the KGC really was. Some have dismissed them as little more than broken-down hacks, gamblers, and drunkards. Others insist their ranks included prominent politicians and that they had sympathizers high up in President James Buchanan's administration. While their grandest ambitions failed, the Knights of the Golden Circle proved that a secret war of whispers and conspiracies was raging right alongside the one fought with cannons. And as we'll see, their story doesn't end when the war does. In the winter of 1864, the Civil War was dragging into its third brutal year, and the Union was desperate for a decisive victory. Out of that desperation came one of the war's most controversial and mysterious episodes, the Dahlgren Affair. The plan itself was incredibly bold. Brigadier General Judson Kilpatrick, nicknamed Kill Cavalry, by his own men for his recklessness, cooked up a lightning raid on the Confederate capital of Richmond. The official goals were to free thousands of Union prisoners from the awful Belle Isle prison and destroy Confederate infrastructure. Joining him was Colonel Ulrich Dahlgren, a charismatic 21-year-old who had already lost a leg in battle. On February 28, 1864, the raid began. But right from the start, everything went wrong. The weather was terrible, turning roads into mud pits. Dahlgren's guide, a freed black man named Martin Robinson, led them to what was supposed to be a shallow river crossing. But recent rains had turned it into a raging torrent. In a fit of fury, Dahlgren, believing he'd been betrayed, ordered the guide to be hanged on the spot. From there, the raid descended into total chaos. Dahlgren failed to meet up with Kilpatrick's main force and was constantly harassed by the Confederate Home Guard. On the night of March 2nd, he and his remaining men rode straight into an ambush. Dahlgren was shot and killed. Ordinarily, that would be the tragic end of a failed mission. But what happened next turned it into a political firestorm. When Confederate soldiers searched Dahlgren's body, they found a packet of papers. And what those papers said would horrify the South. The Dahlgren Papers, as they were called, were quickly published in Richmond newspapers. They appeared to be a set of orders detailing the raid's real objectives. According to the documents, the plan wasn't just to free prisoners. It was to arm them, destroy and burn the hateful city of Richmond, and, most shockingly, kill Jefferson Davis and his cabinet. The outrage in the Confederacy was immediate and explosive. Newspapers called Dahlgren a barbarian. The story spread that the orders came directly from President Lincoln himself. In Richmond, an enraged mob found Dahlgren's secret burial site, dug up his body, and grotesquely displayed his corpse on a train platform. In the North, Union officials from General Meade to President Lincoln furiously denied authorizing any assassination. Dahlgren's father, a prominent admiral, insisted the papers were forgeries Confederate propaganda, and there are reasons to be suspicious. For one, the documents famously misspelled Dahlgren's own name. So what's the truth? Historians are still fiercely divided on whether they were real or a clever Confederate forgery. Could it have been a genuine, unsanctioned plot cooked up by the reckless Kilpatrick and the zealous Dahlgren? The original papers mysteriously vanished after the war, handed over to the Secretary of War and never seen again, ensuring we'll likely never know for sure. In the summer of 1860, as the nation was about to tear itself apart, the wealthy elite of New York and Philadelphia escaped to the fashionable seaside resort of Long Branch, New Jersey. It was a world of grand hotels and lavish parties, completely detached from the coming storm. But on the morning of August 7th, that bubble of tranquility was shattered by a gruesome crime. Behind the Monmouth House Hotel, a horrifying scene was discovered on the beach. There was a large pool of blood in the sand, clear signs of a violent struggle, and a crude, blood-stained wooden club lying nearby. The one thing missing: a body. Panic and a bit of morbid curiosity immediately gripped Long Branch. Hundreds flocked to the beach to gawk at the scene. Newspapers ran front-page stories, speculating wildly about what happened. Was it a wealthy gentleman robbed and murdered? A dispute between hotel workers? No one knew. The victim, it seemed, had vanished into the ocean. The investigation was a circus. The killer had somehow disposed of the body at sea, yet left the murder weapon right on the beach. They'd left a giant pool of blood uncovered, but apparently returned the boat they used to its mooring near the crime scene. It made no sense. Despite the intense media spotlight, the investigation went nowhere. No credible suspects were ever named, and no missing person report ever fit the potential victim. Officially, the Long Branch murder of 1860 remains unsolved. As the country plunged into civil war the following year, the baffling crime was largely forgotten. It stands as a strange and macabre prelude to the national tragedy that would follow, a dark, unsolved secret from the last summer of peace, and a thematic omen of the chaos to come. These stories are just the tip of the iceberg. We're uncovering a side of the Civil War that has been kept in the shadows. If you're hooked on these hidden histories, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We have a lot more secrets to uncover, and you won't want to miss what's next. While armies clashed on the battlefield, another war was being fought in secret than the drawing rooms of Washington and the back alleys of Richmond. This was the War of Espionage. And at the heart of this shadow war were some of its most effective agents: women. In an era when women were expected to be confined to the home, their supposedly gentle nature was the perfect cover. They could move through enemy territory and listen in on powerful men without raising suspicion. On the Confederate side, few were more famous than Belle Boyd, the Cleopatra of the secession. Her spy career began dramatically when she shot and killed a Union soldier who broke into her home and insulted her mother. After being cleared, the young and charming Boyd began coaxing information out of Union officers at her family's hotel. She famously passed intelligence to General Stonewall Jackson during his 1862 Shenandoah Valley campaign. Even more influential was Rose O'Neal Greenhow, a well-connected widow in Washington, D.C. society. She charmed military secrets out of high-ranking Union officials who came to her parties. Her biggest coup came just before the First Battle of Bull Run, when she sent the Union's entire battle plan to the Confederates, hidden in her courier's hair. Confederate President Jefferson Davis later credited her with their stunning victory. Her success eventually got her caught by Allan Pinkerton, head of the Union's new Secret Service, but the Union had its own secret weapons. Perhaps the most effective was Elizabeth Van Lew, a wealthy Richmond native and fierce abolitionist. To hide her work, she pretended to be Crazy Bet, wandering the streets of Richmond muttering to herself. But behind this act, Van Lew was the mastermind of the Richmond Underground, an incredibly effective spy ring. She placed an agent, a former servant named Mary Bowser, as a helper inside the Confederate White House, where she read documents right off Jefferson Davis's desk. Van Lew developed complex codes and used invisible ink to write messages hidden in hollowed-out eggs. Her intelligence was so vital that General Ulysses S. Grant later said it was some of the most important he received during the war. These women were not passive observers. They were cunning, indispensable players in a secret war where a single whisper could be more powerful than a cannon. As the Confederacy collapsed in April 1865, a final, desperate act began. On April 2nd, with Union forces about to take Richmond, Confederate President Jefferson Davis and his cabinet fled by train. With them, they took the last of the Confederate treasury, not the worthless paper money, but the hard currency, an estimated $500,000 in gold, silver, and coins. That train, carrying the last hope of the South, steamed into the night and into legend. The journey south was chaotic. Portions of the treasury were paid out to desperate Confederate soldiers they met along the way. In Washington, Georgia, with the Confederacy effectively dead, the rest of the treasure was dealt with. A large portion, which actually belonged to Richmond banks, was eventually returned. Another sum of about $86,000 in gold was given to 2 officers to smuggle to England. It never made it. That chunk of the treasure was just stolen, vanishing into the post-war chaos. But what about the rest? The gold that belonged to the Confederate government itself. This is where history dissolves into myth. When Jefferson Davis was finally captured on May 10th, he had only a few dollars on him. The treasury was gone. In the years that followed, the legend of the lost Confederate gold exploded. Treasure hunters swarmed the South, armed with sketchy maps and wild stories. Some said Davis buried it just before his capture. Others claimed it was split up and hidden in caches across several states, waiting for the South to rise again. And here, the story gets even stranger, reconnecting with another dark secret. One of the most persistent theories is that the remaining gold was seized by the Knights of the Golden Circle to fund a second rebellion. This tale has taken on a life of its own, even roping in figures like the outlaw Jesse James, who some claim was a KGC member. To this day, people are still digging in the backwoods of Georgia and South Carolina, hoping to find the fortune. While most historians agree the treasure was likely just spent or stolen bit by bit in those final chaotic weeks, the legend is far more exciting. It's a secret fortune that continues to fuel one of America's greatest treasure hunts. The Civil War left literal scars on the American landscape that you can still see today. But some believe the war left behind another kind of wound, that the sheer trauma of those 4 years imprinted itself onto the land, leaving behind spirits of the men who fought and died there. The battlefields of the Civil War are considered some of the most haunted places in America. Gettysburg is ground zero. At Devil's Den, a maze of boulders used by sharpshooters, visitors claim their cameras and phones suddenly die. At Little Round Top, people have reported seeing phantom soldiers still holding the line and hearing the disembodied sounds of musket fire. Perhaps most unnerving is the legend of the Phantom Regiment, a ghostly procession of soldiers heard marching across the fields at night. These stories aren't just at Gettysburg. At Antietam, people claim to hear phantom cannon fire near the Bloody Lane, a sunken road where thousands were slaughtered. The Battle of Shiloh in Tennessee has one of the strangest stories. Wounded soldiers lying on the field noticed that some of their wounds began to emit a faint, eerie glow in the dark. This angel's glow, as it was called, seemed to help them survive. It wasn't until 2001 that scientists proposed a solution. The glow was likely from a soil-based bioluminescent bacterium that also produces an antibiotic, essentially fighting off infection for them. Of course, you could say these are just campfire tales, tricks of the light on tragic ground. But for many, the stories persist. They believe these are the restless souls of hundreds of thousands of men, their last moments replaying in an endless loop. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, these legends speak to a deeper truth, that the Civil War's dead are not entirely gone. April 14, 1865. The war is over. President Lincoln is at Ford's Theater. We all know the story. John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor and Confederate sympathizer, slips into the presidential box, fires a single shot, and escapes into the night. Lincoln dies the next morning. The official story is that Booth was the ringleader of a small group of fanatics. But what if that's not the whole story? What if Booth was just a pawn in a much bigger game for over 150 years? A darker question has lingered. Was the assassination of Abraham Lincoln part of a grand conspiracy? One with roots that reached into the Confederate government itself. The plot was definitely bigger than just killing Lincoln. That same night, one of Booth's co-conspirators brutally attacked Secretary of State William Seward, nearly killing him. Another was assigned to kill Vice President Andrew Johnson, but lost his nerve and got drunk instead. The plan was clear: decapitate the Union government and throw the North into chaos. But how far up did this plot go? Lincoln's own Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, was convinced Jefferson Davis was behind it all. We know Booth traveled to Montreal, a hub for the Confederate Secret Service, months before the assassination and met with agents there. What they talked about remains a mystery. The grand conspiracy theory suggests Booth's original plan to kidnap Lincoln was approved by Confederate officials. And when the war ended, the plot was simply changed to assassination. The aftermath is just as murky. 8 conspirators were tried and convicted. 4 were hanged, including Mary Surratt, the owner of the boarding house where they met. To this day, historians debate her guilt. Her son, John, a key player, escaped to Europe, was eventually caught. But a jury couldn't reach a verdict, and he was set free. And then there's Booth himself. While history says he was killed in a Virginia barn 12 days later, a stubborn myth popped up almost immediately that he got away. This fringe theory, which has been thoroughly debunked by historians, claims another man was killed in his place. Was it a simple plot born from a single man's hatred? Or was it an act of state-sponsored terror ordered by the Confederacy? The evidence directly linking Jefferson Davis is circumstantial, but the shadows of doubt remain. We've explored tales of a secret slave empire, a potential assassination order from the top, and a treasure that became a legend. We walked with spies who changed the course of battles and listened for the ghostly echoes of soldiers on the battlefield. It all goes to show that the Civil War was more than just a conflict between 2 armies in blue and gray. It was also a war of secrets, lies, and conspiracies. The neat and tidy version we learned in school is only part of the story. The truth is far messier, more complicated, and, let's be honest, way more interesting. It makes you wonder, what other secrets are still out there? Buried in a dusty archive or a forgotten diary, just waiting to be found? Let us know in the comments which of these dark secrets shocked you the most. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden side of history, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.